Morning, Davis. Good morning, Carlos.
Good
Morning, James.
Or is it evening? It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell. It's quite dark, isn't it?
It is dark. We're in the Humble Grape Canary Wharf private dining room, so you can see the lions behind us that Malgosia Stepnik painted for us. We've got her art in like all of our sites. It's pretty unusual, pretty interesting.
Pretty striking.
Yeah.
Her work's pretty
It's pretty unusual like us. Hey,
That would be the scene for a different podcast.
So we're getting into quite a few podcasts now with Humble Grape, and just for the listeners, the purpose of these podcasts is to entertain, enlighten, have interesting conversations about winemaking, get some interesting guests on, and to just dispel some of the myths that are old wives' tales myths.
True.
I remember when I was a kid, someone told me that if you burn yourself, you've got to put butter on the burn. That was a terrible idea. Turned out didn't do me any good at all.
It has to be cold butter, not melted.
Cold butter. Okay. Anyway, that just made things a hell of a lot worse. So, in the spirit of not making things worse for people who are trying to enjoy wine and making them better, let's dive into some interesting wine myths. David, over to you. What have you got for us?
So last time we were talking about 4 or 5 different wine myths, and we spent quite a nice time on that, and then we realized halfway through that we're not going to be able to do it in one podcast, so we need to do in 2 separate, maybe 3 separate parts. So this time we gathered 4 or 5 other very interesting ones, and let's just get straight in the middle. Because I had a little bit of chat with Cash, who is not with us today, and she's a little bit of new in wine world, so I asked her like what kind of things are there that she would like to ask us as like people who are into wine, and like and what would be and one of the first thing that came up, and it was very interesting because I heard it from many other people as well, that they say that is that true that great wine has great legs, and many people do not know that what that leg thing is. And it's quite outdated. It's quite an outdated thing that how you evaluate wines, and it's so funny that it keeps coming because I don't think in the wine industry the past 15-20 years we've been talking about legs anymore.
That's true. I haven't heard about legs for a while, but when I did start out on wine, there were a bunch of people teaching us how to taste, and I remember being in a wine tasting where someone swirled a glass around and said, "Look at the legs." It was the wine running down the inside of the glass, and I was like, "That's a bit strange."
It's a bit niche, isn't it?
It's a bit niche, don't look like legs to me. And then when I inquired as to what the purpose of the legs was, like, you can tell a wine with more alcohol has bigger legs. So, I was like, okay.
It's interesting because we haven't evaluated wine in that way for a very long time. But every now and then, in events and tastings, the question comes up, what are the legs in the glass? The reason why we don't really look at legs a lot is that the first thing is glasses have micropores, right? If you pour a glass of champagne and you look at the glass, you can see exactly where the pores are because you can see the bubbles coming up. So those micropores, they will create legs. They will help the legs and tears. They will help holding wine back.
And now we've got tears as well. Legs and tears.
There's all sorts of things. I've heard of legs, cathedral arches, tears.
There's usually tears when my wine glass is empty, not when it's full.
Well, you have friends in the room in that one. I think, does it have to do with alcohol? It does, but what you're seeing when you see those tears forming on the glass is actually the alcohol evaporating out of the wine.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's a name for that process. For the geeks listening, it's called Gibbs-Maragoni, and NASA did a whole lot of tests on it. There's some really, really cool videos on YouTube.
NASA did tests on the legs of wine.
On how alcohol evaporating out of a solution changes the tension. Yeah.
Well done, NASA. You finally did something useful.
Another thing that could create those tears is wines with high sugar content. Right? Wines like port or sauterne, those wines have a lot of sugar, and sugar changes the viscosity of the wine. So the wine feels thicker.
So it's more viscous. Yeah.
Yes, and it sticks to the walls of the glass.
Okay, that's interesting.
But
And
do
would
great
that-
wines have great legs? No.
No. And would alcohol content, like a big Chateau Neuf de Pape, would it have more legs than a flurry, from the Beaujolais, or?
Yes,
Potentially.
it will.
Potentially, yeah.
Yes.
I think it's worth, like every bit is worth to approach it from the truth core, because every myth or every conspiracy theory always has a truth core, but like a part of it, and then everything else is just added on the top of that, which is not true. I think what happened here is, back in the time, like going back to like the beginning of the 20th century, 1800s, when global warming wasn't at its peak like today, it was not that easy to ripen grape. And if you could ripen, it resulted in more alcohol and therefore more sugar in some cases. And back in the time, it was a very important indication of thickness of the wine.
The quality.
Because the thickness of the wine could show the quality, like if it was from a warm area. Just think about the German classification system with the Auslese. It's all about that. It's very old and outdated. And this kind of approach, I think it goes back to the 18th century and the beginning of the 20th.
Interesting.
And it just remained in the society, and people keep talking about. Whereas in the wine industry, we do not talk about this anymore because we know that this is not that important anymore. And also, I think there is a shift in the wine world that we focus more on nuances and concentration of flavors, which is now more associated with long not necessarily ripening, not necessarily very warm areas.
That's interesting. Cool.
That's an interesting point.
So what else have we got today?
Shall we dive into a big one that we hear a lot?
Yep.
Sulfites cause a headache.
Sulfites cause headaches. Yes, that's a good one. Because I've had headaches after drinking 2 bottles of zero sulfite wine. So I know that's anecdotal and not clinically proven, but what do you say to that?
Well, hangovers, it's very simple. They are symptoms of alcohol poisoning. You drank too much alcohol, and then the next day you will have a hangover. People tend to blame on sulfites. I think because winemakers have to put on the label contains sulfite, because sulfite is an allergen.
Yep.
Right. Very few people are actually allergic to sulfite, and what people don't realize is that if you grab a handful of dried apricots and put in your cereal in the morning, that handful has as much sulfite as a glass of white wine.
Oh right, interesting. I didn't know that.
So it's not really sulfite that's causing hangovers.
Yeah.
If someone is really allergic to sulfite, they know that they can't eat dried fruits. They can't eat frozen food because it contains a lot of sulfite.
So I've got an interesting story talking about hangovers. When I was doing my postgrad in psychology, I did a master's in psychology. My thesis was on hangovers.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I got a bunch of my fellow students into an experiment. I think we had 20 of them, and there was 2 different groups. And I would get them in a room and strap EEG machine to them and read the brainwave patterns, and then get them to go out, get howling drunk, record what they did, and then I had to read the pattern again. The next afternoon, not the next morning when the alcohol is still in the system, because you have to wait for the alcohol to clear the system, and then the hangover actually kicks in, and it's the dehydration, the withdrawal, and all that kind of stuff. And one of the interesting things, the EEG patterns were difficult to read, because in those days we didn't have the advanced mathematics to find statistical differences. But the interesting thing on some of the tests that I got people to conduct is that obviously on complex tests and complex tasks they fared worse, but on really simple rote tasks, a lot of people were statistically significantly better when hungover than when they weren't. Like easy admin tasks, right? Repetitive admin, you can do it much better when you're hangover because you're not distracted. Isn't that useful, right?
That's very useful information.
So I should have an admin job then.
Or get more hangovers more often.
Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays.
Most productive days, right?
Yeah.
I think it's mainly dehydration. Probably this is what usually most of the scientific research say. Maybe I also went to university. I studied biology and environment engineering, and we did a few organic chemistry there. And I got some memories about the alcohol consumption. And I remember that if there are certain compounds in wine and beer that can bond water, so it means that even if you drink, and if these compounds there, it's gonna make you even more dehydrated than without these compounds. And potentially they say the sulfite can be one of those molecules, but I don't think this is a necessary case because every wine contains sulfite, and we don't always end up with a hangover. I think it's mainly because of how much you drink that night.
Often people forget the 2 or 3 tequila shots they have, after dinner.
Absolutely.
And they blow in the wine. So don't do that, guys. That's not fair.
There's nothing to do with wine.
You're not gonna get away without hangover if you drink alcohol, guys. I think I can only recommend one thing: drink a glass of water after every glass of wine. I think you're gonna be sorted.
Good advice.
Okay, that's a good recipe.
So what's next?
Okay, David, what should we talk about next?
Oh, I have one here, a good one. So, does wine breathe once the bottle is open?
Yep.
I mean, short ones, yes. Every wine breathes, and every wine changes flavors with oxygen, but.
Yeah.
Why is it important for us? I mean, not everyone reacts the same way.
So that's an interesting one. So the breathing of wine. So firstly, not every wine needs to breathe before you drink it, because and a lot of people will actually ruin a nice, very old vintage wine by opening it and decanting it and leaving it to breathe for too long. That can totally ruin it. And a lot of people are convinced that you have to decant and let breathe old wine, but you don't. Because you just lose all the fruit, and that like ruins, like if you've got an 82 mouton and you decant it for 4 hours before lunch. I've known people do that. That mouton wasn't very good. I'm like, you decanted it like the morning before dinner. So that the wines that need to breathe. I'm sure you spoke about this last time.
Yes.
But the ones that really need to breathe are kind of younger wines, like big Bordeaux that need a bit more aging, and you open them a little bit too early, then you can decant them and breathe them. Now, just opening the bottle on its own and leaving it out with that tiny little bit of surface area of the wine in the neck touching the air isn't the same as having it in a decanter when you've got almost like a dinner plate surface area touching the air for breathing purposes. So just for people who are doing that,
It does nothing to the wine.
Yeah.
For you to just open the bottle and let the wine breathe in the bottle and see the difference, you're gonna have to open the bottle 4 or 5 hours before dinner.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the surface in contact with oxygen is very, very small. The wine won't change. Yeah. So it's a myth. Not every wine needs to breathe, and bottle is not the best place to let it breathe.
Some wines can get ruined by breathing.
Yes.
Too much. Yeah.
I have a trick to avoid this 4 or 5 hours before. So what I usually do when I have a very nice, beautiful, fairly young concentrated red.
If you use the word blender here,
yes.
I am walking out of this podcast.
You can say double
blender.
decant. Say double decant.
No, so basically what I do is I open the bottle the day before, and I decant it and I pour it back in the bottle, and I cork it back. So it gets just enough oxygen, but not too much to start the oxidation process.
Okay.
And overnight, it's just enough. But you need to cork it back. No more oxygen. So this is what I usually do when I want.
Okay. And for the folks listening to the podcast and watching, there was a trend on Instagram, TikTok some time back of people pouring wine in blenders and blending the wine. Guys, it's not a grape smoothie. It's wine. It doesn't need to go into the blender. It goes into your glass.
And I've also seen TikTok videos with people pouring wine into a glass and then cutting it with a pair of scissors, saying, "I've been told to cut my wine consumption." Right? That doesn't really help either. Right? No. Just because you're slicing it with a pair of scissors before it goes into the glass doesn't mean you're drinking less.
It does not help. Doesn't help either. How about, and this is more of it's not really a myth, but it's more of a misconception. Wines that don't come in bottles, for instance, wines that come in kegs or boxes.
Tetra Pak.
Yeah. Are these wines inferior?
That's a good question. I suppose you could put Chateau Lafite into a keg. But then it wouldn't be mise en bouteille au château, it would be mise en boîte.
Okay.
and I think that would be against French wine regulations. But so no, it doesn't necessarily mean it's inferior quality. The problem with that kind of bulk wine, keg wine stuff is it was traditionally done as for cost purposes.
Yes.
So traditionally they would put the very cheapest wines in large format, big 5 litre bottles, kegs, bag in box kind of stuff. And but lately the trend is kind of reversed, and you're getting some super high quality wines in keg and in different formats.
Yeah, I agree. It's we have wine kegs in our venues, but we were very careful in sourcing that. So the wines that are in the kegs are the same wines that the producer put in bottle, and they are all organic. So you taste them. The wines taste fantastic coming out of the keg, as fantastic as coming out of the bottle, and it's much more sustainable to transport and sell than having wines in bottle.
Okay.
Because almost 50% of the carbon footprint of a bottle of wine comes from bottle making.
Nice.
If you remove the bottle out, the whole thing becomes a lot more sustainable.
Yeah, and not to mention the cost of transport for heavy wine bottles, all the fuel the extra fuel they would burn because of the weight of those wine bottles, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention if the wine we drink is something that can age or not, and do we want it to age? Because some wines they age and they don't taste well after 4 years.
Correct. Yeah.
And then these kind of container vessels like keg or a can are perfect for fresh, easy drinking, very good quality white wine and red wines. And you don't want to age because they wouldn't benefit from it, and it would be a waste of time, money, weight, and transport costs to put them in bottles. So I think it's a very good option to keep these wines in. But answering strictly to the question, if it's inferior, it really depends on how you describe inferiority. If you think ageability is something that puts wines in a better quality, then okay, yes, the answer in short would be yes to this question. But it's important to understand that that's not necessarily the wine you want to drink. I want to drink a very good quality, fresh, easy drinking white wine, and then it's much better to drink it from keg in my opinion.
Yeah. I agree. Totally agree.
Okay, what have we got next?
Oh, I got a good one here.
Yeah.
So, the best wines come from famous wine regions.
Is
that true?
So this is interesting. I like to use the diamond analogy here, right? So a diamond technically is useful for drilling holes in reinforced concrete, and it has medical use as well. But if the supply of diamonds wasn't so well controlled and all that kind of stuff, then it would be technically not a worthless rock, but it would be worth a fraction of what it is now. So if you take that into marketing and the branding world, there's a lot of stuff like handbags that cost $100 to make that people are selling for $2,000 or $3,000, and all that kind of stuff. And then a famous wine, like a really famous wine that is kind of expensive because there's more demand than supply, right? That's also interesting. That happens. But does it make it better than a wine that's just as good quality that's less famous, that's not so known? And I think those are more interesting wines. So what do you guys think?
I think this is more of people feeling comfortable with what they are comfortable with, rather than a myth. People feel comfortable in ordering a bottle of Côte d'Or or a bottle of Bordeaux, or a bottle of Champagne, because they are well-known.
They know what they're going to get.
Brands, they're well-known brands. But you can get some really fantastic gems from places that are not very well known.
Yeah.
We've got some examples from North Macedonia.
Yeah.
We can get fantastic wines from North Macedonia, and it's not a very well-known wine region. And I agree with you that the thing with the very famous wine regions is that they become a brand in themselves, like Champagne.
Yeah.
And then that generates demand. The demand pushes the price up.
Yeah.
And then I think the consumer associates a famous wine region with a high price product as being a great product, and we know that sometimes it's not.
Yeah, I mean, and like Burgundy is a classic example because it's a small wine region, smallish compared to Bordeaux and others, and the prices in some of those famous wine regions in Burgundy
eye-watering.
Eye-watering.
Yeah.
You know, we can't, like, a lot of people can't afford to drink Burgundy anymore. Right?
It's true.
Yeah, I wanted to bring in Bordeaux actually,
Yeah.
because the question is the best wines come from the famous wine region. Bordeaux is undoubtedly one of the most famous wine regions in the world, but not everybody knows that a wine region didn't necessarily become famous because it produced so fantastic, super quality wines. There were also politics behind it and historical events, and Bordeaux is one of those regions in the world that had a British influence for a long time, and it was in the interest of the British market to put money in them and make more wine. So Bordeaux was for a long time not making the best wines in the world, but still gained a very good reputation, and a lot of money was put in that, so the winemakers could make better and better wines there. Also very interesting, like what big wine regions often being utilized in a way that the name can be put on the label, and more inferior wines can be sold under the name. So just because you see Bordeaux or Rioja on a bottle, it doesn't mean that it's going to give you that quality what you heard about from your parents. So this is it can be tricky. I would highly recommend to try other regions, not necessarily sticking to the big names, because you would be very surprised that you can get very good value from lesser known regions.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Interesting. Cool.
I think there's one that goes in the opposite direction here. Cheaper wines are bad.
Cheaper wines are bad. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
$2 Chuck. Did you guys know $2 Chuck?
No.
$2 Chuck was a very cheap American wine that came out, I think, in the 80s in the US, and it was called $2 Chuck because it was $2 for a bottle, and they sold millions of them, right?
Wow.
And Yellowtail, the Australian wine, that brand, they sold millions of bottles of that stuff.
White
Zinfandel. So there's a lot of stuff out there, you know, and you had the Liebfraumilch thing, which kind of completely ruined the reputation of German wines. For many years, even today, some people refuse to drink Riesling. Blue Nun, they think Riesling is going to be bad and sweet, which is kind of interesting. But, you know, I must say, like, one of the things I love doing at Humble Grape is finding that little gem, that little, you know, that cheaper wine that, like, you're paying like £15-20 retail, and it's absolutely astonishing, and you love it. And one of the examples is the Sicilian wine we brought in recently, the Insolia.
From Viniconsiglio,
which is just it's just an amazing wine, right? Like, I love it. I just keep 6 bottles at home every Friday when it's pizza night. I have to grab one of those bad boys, right?
Nice.
Yeah, I had that wine in my mind because it is not an expensive wine, but it delivers so much value for the money that you pay in the bottle.
If you didn't catch it, it's Insolia from Viniconsiglio.
Yeah. So folks, cheaper wines aren't necessarily bad. When we look at buying, acquiring wine from Humble Grape, I don't really worship the really expensive wines. I look, when we're sourcing for Humble Grape, what can deliver great value for money. For the price tag, because I think that's important. And the concept of best wine or worst wine, it's the best wine is the one that you like.
Correct.
The price tag doesn't matter.
And that's the whole point, is why we created Humble Grape in the first place, is to find wine that people love and that individual. So when an individual comes to visit one of our wine bars, it's our job to find them a wine they like, not for us to tell them what they should be drinking.
Or how much you should be paying to get pleasure out of the bottle.
So as Carlos said, the best wine out there is the one you love.
The price tag doesn't matter.
Exactly. What else have we got?
We have one last point left, and this is natural wines don't. Actually, this is the same as the soap, and natural wines don't give hangover.
Natural wines don't give hangovers. Well, natural wines, because they are natural, makes them better than other wines, right? I've heard that people say that all the time. Oh, our wines are brilliant because they're natural. So the fundamental problem with that statement is that natural wines might have been made in a natural way, which is by definition then they get called natural wines. But some weird stuff could have been going on in the vineyard, right? They could have been spraying in the vineyard, there could be pesticides, there could be all sorts of weird stuff going on. And now, but they're made in a natural way, and now people think that they're better. So, I mean, I would suggest if people are worried about health conscious and stuff like that, is just go for organic or biodynamic wines, because that means the winemaking process and the grape growing process has been done in a clean way.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, natural wines will give you hangover. It just depends on how much you drink.
Yeah.
You know, as we discussed, it doesn't.
I mean, if
it
you
doesn't
drink too much water, you're going to get sick, right?
Well, in London you could. But guys, hangover is your body reacting to alcohol. You know, your liver is producing acetaldehydes, your body can metabolize, that will give you a terrible hangover. And the natural wines will have the same reaction because there's alcohol involved.
Yeah.
Right?
But I do love some natural wines,
It's
like
technically-
Chateau Reyes and stuff like that. Right?
There's some great producers in Beaujolais as well.
Beaujolais, yeah.
Agree. I cannot really add anything. I think it's very much related to the previous question about a headache. It's because the headache is just a symptom of hangover.
Yeah.
Natural wine there's alcohol, so if you drink alcohol and you drink it without limits, that you're going to face the consequences of hangover and
So think,
headache.
speaking of the consequences, what are we drinking tonight? Yeah.
It's gonna focus on work tomorrow.
I'm going to be tucking into a Palomino from Blackwater, which
Nice.
is hands down one of my favorite South African wines of all time. Palomino, the sherry grape, and Blackwater, Francois from Blackwater makes this wine in a very natural way, and it's absolutely beautiful. I love it. I just can't get enough of it.
That's a good one.
I'm going to
Yeah.
make sure the guys at Humble Grape Islington have got some ready for me tonight. What do you
Yeah,
think
that
tonight,
one
David?
is fantastic.
I'm not really sure. I wasn't thinking. Maybe I'm gonna go to Russell Joyce Chardonnay Submarine Canyon. It's in
I've heard
Monterey,
that. I've
Monterey ADA.
Monterey. I've heard that Russell Joyce is fantastic.
This is my absolute favorite at the moment.
Okay.
My favorite Chardonnay from our portfolio. I cannot get enough. I could take a bath in it.
Brilliant. Okay, that's going to be expensive.
That's going to be a very expensive bath indeed. Yeah, I think I'm going to be tucking into a bottle of Cab Sav tonight from
Nice.
South Africa.
Nice. Let me guess.
2019 vintage.
Let me guess.
Guess.
Plezier.
Plezier.
I had a glass of that last night. At Villa
Oh
Park
my
Australia.
god, that
Fantastic.
it goes back to the value for money ratio. That wine delivers so much. So I wouldn't have a bath in it, but I could drink a bottle with a straw.
Brilliant.
The whole thing. It's a
So,
delicious wine.
I hope everyone enjoyed the chat. Thank you, David. Thank you, Carlos, for everything. If anyone has any interesting topics they'd like us to discuss or chat about during the podcast, please drop us a DM or drop some comments in on YouTube or where we are. And thank you very much for listening.